Here at home, officials aren't taking any chances after those attacks in Belgium. As CBS News has learned, the FBI is now stepping up its surveillance in the United States of potential terrorist suspects as they are concerned about possible copycat attacks.
Officials say there are no credible threats against the U.S., but they are ramping up their efforts, including looking closely at open working investigations and making sure they know where certain individuals previously on their radar are located. Frank Cilluffo is the Associate Vice President of the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security and joins us now from Washington. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Vanita.
So we now know that this was certainly ISIS. That was something that we had been sort of speculating about a lot throughout the course of this morning. How does that change the investigation in terms of what officials need to do right now?
You know, I mean, clearly overseas, you've got a scale and scope that is quite large, especially in Belgium, a small country with 300 to 400 to 500 Belgians who fought alongside ISIS and ISIL in Iraq and Syria. So they've got a big challenge on their hands. I think some of the questions we need to be asking, was this a direct response to the recent arrest of Abdel Salam, and whether or not, or if this was something that was initiated soon thereafter, and who's calling the shots. Clearly, ISIS has the intent, but are there other operations in play? And this is something we need to take seriously. Even short, hard intelligence and information, we ought to be taking precautionary measures, and I'm happy to hear the United States is doing so. From a U.S. perspective, there are a couple hundred Americans who've tried to travel to Syria and Iraq to join up with jihadist organizations. So the scale and scope is not the same of Europe. But unfortunately, terrorism is a small numbers business, and we need to take it very seriously.
Meanwhile, Frank, we have seen in some parts of Europe, they have very extensive surveillance networks the governments do on the part of their countries. However, Hillary Clinton, in joining CBS this morning earlier today, said that perhaps this was a failure of intelligence gathering and the ability to surveil to the degree that perhaps officials would like. So seeing that spectrum, if you will, and with worries now as the FBI has announced that it is stepping up surveillance today of potential terrorist suspects, what changes might we see to the surveillance system here?
You know, I mean, firstly, in terms of what we saw in Belgium, the fact that you had a terrorist number one on the lam for so long does question just how is he able to evade authorities for so long. So that's a really legitimate question we need to be asking the Belgian authorities. On the U.S. side, I think we've had our arms around this issue for a long period of time. You're never going to be 100%, but I think you go after the known suspects and you enhance security at transportation facilities, hubs of transportation, and areas of large gatherings. So there's certain steps you can take agnostic to hard information we ought to be taking. But I mean, in the European sense, I don't think you can paint a one-size-fits-all approach for all of Europe. Just last week, I hosted the French Minister of Interior, Cazeneuve, for his first remarks since the Paris attacks. And I can tell you the French are taking very proactive steps to be able to enhance security. Unfortunately, the Belgians, I would argue, have not done enough and clearly are asking hard questions as we speak.
You know, when you say have not done enough, I think a lot of people look at ISIS and they recognize that some of their power has really been recruitment online. You're someone that specializes in cyber and homeland security. How is it you think that ISIS is able to recruit so many people without even bringing them into a central location? Previously, we'd seen with Al-Qaeda, people were coming to them. This is a message that's getting out, it seems, almost entirely through the internet.
You're absolutely right. And that's the way to look at it from a U.S. perspective. It's not only going to be those that have traveled overseas. They're obviously a bigger concern because they're going to have operational tradecraft and military capabilities. But you're also seeing an increasing number being inspired by ISIS's narrative, by the jihadi narrative. We obviously need to do more there. And if you even look at ISIS's tradecraft, these aren't simply kids on their iPhones. You're dealing with, they've overtaken TV stations where they've taken, they've got the same capabilities networks such as this one have to be able to film, and they have almost as many people with cameras as they do with the fingers on triggers of Kalashnikov. So, I mean, basically there are three things you can do in terms of fighting back online. One, you can collect information. You need the intelligence. You want to get a sense of the network. You want to get a sense of who's being lured to the narrative. 2, you can start pushing down and shutting down sites, and I think we need to be doing more of that. You're starting to see some increased activity between the government and social media providers, such as Twitter, such as Facebook and the like. But let's push it to the margins. Let's make it harder for people to access this information. And the third is the area I would argue we've done very little, and that's to push back, to expose the hypocrisy of the narrative, to show that it's ideologically bankrupt. And quite honestly, we haven't done too much in that space. That's the missing dimension of our counterterrorism statecraft, if you ask me.
And that's certainly something to keep our eyes upon. Frank Cilluffo, Associate Vice President of the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. We appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Josh.